A little girl stood up for her wrongfully accused father, and what she did in court made the whole town cry. Oliver Miller was a man of simple pleasures. He worked hard every day, not for wealth or luxury, but for the joy of coming home to his little girl, Emma. Since the tragic passing of his wife during childbirth, he had dedicated his entire life to raising her with love, patience, and devotion. Despite their modest means, their home was filled with warmth, laughter, and a special bond that nothing in the world could break. Every evening, Oliver and Emma had a routine, one that neither of them would ever dare to skip. After dinner, Oliver would carry his 6-year-old daughter to bed, tuck her in snugly, and sit by her side, spinning tales of faraway lands, brave heroes, and magical creatures. Emma, wide-eyed with wonder, would clutch her favorite stuffed bear, a gift from her father on her last birthday, and listen intently, her tiny fingers gripping his hand until sleep finally claimed her. That night was no different. The rain tapped gently against the window pane as Oliver's deep, soothing voice filled the dimly lit room, and the princess, with her golden crown, looked at the stars and made a wish, he whispered, brushing Emma's hair from her forehead. She yawned, snuggling into her pillow. What did she wish for, Daddy? Oliver smiled. She wished for happiness, for her and the people she loved. Emma sighed, her eyelids growing heavier. That's a good wish. A small chuckle escaped Oliver's lips as he leaned in and kissed her forehead. Good night, my little star. With a sleepy smile, Emma whispered back, Good night, Daddy. Oliver stood, turned off the bedside lamp and quietly left the room, not knowing that this was the last bedtime story he would tell his daughter before their world was turned upside down. Sometime later, deep into the night, the sound of pounding. Fists against the front door shattered the peace of their home. Bang, bang, bang. Oliver jolted awake. His heart pounded. Who could be at the door at this hour? He rushed to answer, his mind racing with possibilities. But the moment he unlocked and swung the door open, his breath caught in his throat. Red and blue lights flashed outside. A group of officers stood on his doorstep, their faces grim. Before he could speak, one of them grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. Oliver Miller, you're under arrest. Emma's terrified scream pierced the air. The life they had built, one of bedtime stories, laughter, and love, was about to be shattered forever. Emma woke up with a start. A loud, sharp banging echoed through the house, making her heart race. She blinked in the darkness, clutching her teddy bear tightly. Another bang. Then voices. From the hallway, she heard hurried footsteps, her father's. Oliver stumbled to the front door, still groggy with sleep. But the moment he swung it open, all exhaustion vanished. A row of uniformed officers stood on his porch, their faces cold and unreadable. The officer in front, a broad-shouldered man with a stern expression, wasted no time. Oliver Miller, you pay. Are under arrest. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Oliver's breath hitched. What? His voice cracked. There must be a mistake. I haven't done anything. Before he could protest further, strong hands grabbed his arms and twisted them behind his back. The cold metal of handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Daddy? A small, trembling voice broke through the chaos. Emma stood in the hallway, barefoot, her teddy bear slipping from her grasp. Her big, innocent eyes filled with tears as she watched the nightmare unfold before her. Oliver turned to her, his own fear drowned out by the need to comfort her. Stay inside, baby, he pleaded, his voice breaking. It's going to be okay, but the truth was, he didn't know if it would be. The officers dragged him outside into the cold night as the rain began to fall. Emma ran to the doorway, her tiny frame shaking. No, she sobbed. Daddy. The police car door slammed shut, cutting off his view of her. As the vehicle pulled away, Oliver kept his eyes locked on the little girl standing in the doorway, her cries growing fainter. And in that moment he realized this wasn't just a nightmare, it was real. The house felt too big without him. Emma sat on the edge of her bed, swinging her little feet as she hugged her teddy bear tightly. Her father's scent still clung to it, but it wasn't the same as having him there. Every night he would tell her a story, kiss her forehead and whisper, "Good night, my little star." But tonight there was only silence. She squeezed her, eyes shut, trying to pretend it was just another normal night. But when she opened them, the cold emptiness of her room remained. Her great-aunt Martha appeared in the doorway. "Time for bed, sweetheart," she said gently. Emma didn't move. She stared at the floor, her small hands gripping the bear tighter. "When is Daddy coming back?" Martha sighed, stepping closer. "I don't know yet, Emma." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. "But he didn't do anything." "Wrong," she insisted. "He was here. He told me a story." Martha knelt beside her and stroked her hair. "I know, sweetie, but these things take time. The police think they have proof. The lawyers have to figure it out." Emma frowned. Proof? She didn't understand everything about courts and lawyers, but she did know one thing. People needed proof to believe something was true. She pulled away slightly. "But I know he was here," she whispered. Martha gave her a sad smile. "I believe you, but it's not that simple." Emma felt frustration bubble inside her. If she could just show them... But how? She was only 6. No one listened to kids. A lump formed in her throat. She didn't know how to fix this. She curled up, under the covers, hugging her teddy bear close. "I just want Daddy," she mumbled. Martha kissed the top of her head. "I know, sweetheart. Get some sleep." As the door clicked shut, Emma kept her eyes open in the dark. She didn't know how, but she would find a way to bring her father home. The days passed slowly, each one feeling heavier than the last. Emma no longer laughed when she watched cartoons. She no longer hummed when she colored. Even her favorite cereal didn't taste the same. Nothing did. Not without her dad. Martha tried to keep her occupied, but Emma could see the worry in her eyes. Every time the phone rang, Martha would rush to answer, her voice hushed and serious. Emma knew she was talking about Daddy. One afternoon, while Martha was on another phone call, Emma sat by the window, staring outside. The autumn leaves swirled in the wind, but the world didn't feel as beautiful as it used to. Then she saw him. Mr. Dawson, their neighbor, was walking to his mailbox across the street. He was always nice to Daddy, sometimes bringing him extra vegetables from his garden. Emma's heart pounded. Maybe he could help. Before she could overthink it, she slipped on her shoes, grabbed her teddy bear, and ran outside. "Mr. Dawson," she called, her small voice urgent. The elderly man turned, surprised to see her. "Well, hello there, Emma. Everything all right?" She ran up to him, breathless. "You know my daddy didn't do anything bad, right?" His face softened. He crouched, down to her level. "I sure hope not, sweetheart. Your daddy's a good man." Emma swallowed hard. Do you remember seeing him that night?" Mr. Dawson rubbed his chin. The night he was taken." She nodded quickly. He thought for a moment. "I remember hearing the rain start. I went out to bring my plants in. I think I saw your dad's light on through the window." Emma's heart jumped. "Do you know what time?" Mr. Dawson shook his head. "Can't say for sure, but it was sometime after 9. Emma's excitement faded a little. "But you don't know exactly." "I wish I did, sweetheart," he said gently. "But don't you worry. The truth has a way of coming out." Emma's shoulders slumped. She wanted to believe him, but what if it wasn't enough? She thanked him and slowly walked back inside. Maybe Mr. Dawson was right. Maybe the truth would come out. But it still wasn't the proof she needed. And then, one night soon after, she would find it, hidden inside her teddy bear. Emma lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the street lamp outside her window. She could hear Martha in the other room, speaking softly on the phone, probably talking about Daddy again. She rolled onto her side, hugging her teddy bear close. It still smelled like him. It was the only thing that made her feel safe. Tears welled up in her eyes. She hated feeling this small, this helpless. She knew Daddy hadn't done anything wrong. She knew it. But no one seemed to believe her. She sniffled and buried her face in the bear's fur. And then she felt something. A tiny bump inside the bear's belly. Emma froze. She sat up quickly and ran her hands over it again. There was definitely something hard inside, something that wasn't stuffing. Her heart pounded. She turned the bear over and found the small zipper on its back. It was barely noticeable, hidden under the fur. Her fingers trembled as she unzipped it and reached inside, her hand wrapped around something small and cool. She pulled it out. It was a tiny recording device. Emma frowned. How did this get in there? She turned it over in her hands, then noticed. A small button. She pressed play. A faint crackle filled the room. Then, her father's voice. "All right, little star, what story shall we tell tonight?" Emma gasped. Her father's voice. From that night. She pressed the bear to her chest as she listened. She could hear herself giggling in the background, her father chuckling softly. The story he told that night began to play just as she remembered it. But then something else. A muffled voice from the TV. "Good evening, it's exactly 9:02 p.m., and these are tonight's top stories." Emma's breath caught in her throat. The news was on. The time was 9:02 p.m. The police said the crime happened between 9:10 and 9:30 p.m. But if her father was home at 9:02, telling her a story with the TV in the background, then he couldn't have done it. Her hands clenched around the recorder. This was it. This was proof. Emma jumped out of bed and ran to Martha's room, her small feet thudding against the wooden floor. She pushed the door open, breathless. "Martha, I found something. I found proof." Martha, startled, turned to her. "Emma, what?" But Emma didn't wait. She held up the recorder. "Daddy was home. I can prove it." Martha's eyes widened. She reached for the device, pressing play. As Oliver's voice filled the room, along with the unmistakable sound of the TV news, Martha's face went pale. She slowly sat down, one hand covering her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. Emma's eyes shone with hope. This was it. This was how she was going to save her daddy. Martha sat frozen, the recorder still playing in her hands. Emma stood before her, gripping her teddy bear tightly, her small chest rising and falling with each excited breath. "Martha," Emma pleaded, "this proves it, right? Daddy was home. He didn't do anything bad." Martha slowly lifted her, eyes still pale with shock. "Emma, this could change everything." Emma's heart soared. "Then we have to show it to the police." Martha hesitated. "We need to do this the right way." She grabbed her phone and dialed quickly. "I'll call Mr. Harris." Mr. Harris was Oliver's lawyer. Emma had heard his name many times over the past few days, always spoken in worried tones. She shifted impatiently as Martha spoke hurriedly into the phone. "Mark, listen, something's happened. Emma found a recording, yes, from that night. It proves Oliver was home." A pause. "No, I heard it myself. The TV news is in the background, time-stamped at 9:02 p.m. Another pause. Martha's face hardened. "Then we have to make them listen." She hung up and turned to Emma. "Get your shoes on, sweetheart. We're going to the courthouse." Emma didn't need to be told twice. She ran to the door, slipping into her little sneakers as Martha grabbed her coat. Within minutes they were in the car, speeding through the quiet town streets. The courthouse was big and intimidating, with tall columns that stretched into the night sky. Emma clutched Martha's hand as they rushed inside. Mr. Harris was already waiting for them, his face tense. "Let me hear it." Martha handed him the recorder. He pressed play, listening intently. When the TV anchor's voice announced the time, 9:02 p.m., his eyes flickered with something Emma didn't quite understand. "Hope? Relief? This is solid," he muttered. "This could be exactly what we need." Emma tugged his sleeve. "Does this mean Daddy can come home now?" Mr. Harris knelt down, his expression softening. "It means we have a real chance, but we need the judge to hear this first." He stood up, already pulling out his phone. "I'm calling the prosecutor. We're filing an emergency motion first thing in the morning." Emma didn't understand all the big words, but she understood one thing. Something was finally happening. Martha sighed, squeezing Emma's shoulder. "We did it, sweetheart. We found the proof." Emma nodded, but inside she knew it wasn't over yet. Her father was still in jail, and until he was free, she wouldn't stop fighting. The next morning, Emma dressed quickly, her small hands trembling with excitement and nerves. Today was the day. Today, everyone would finally listen. Martha had barely slept, making phone calls deep into the night. Mr. Harris had worked fast, filing an emergency motion to present the new evidence. Now they were heading to the courthouse, where a judge would decide if the recording was enough to overturn her father's case. As they arrived, Emma clutched her teddy bear tightly. The courthouse was huge, with marble floors that echoed with every step. Grown-ups in suits walked past, speaking in hushed voices, carrying stacks of papers. Everything felt too big, too serious. But Emma wasn't afraid. She was ready. Inside the courtroom, Oliver sat at the defendant's table. He looked different, tired, worn down, but when he saw Emma, his eyes filled with warmth. He gave her a small smile, and for the first time in days she felt like she could breathe. The judge entered, an older woman with silver hair and a sharp gaze. She banged her gavel, and the room fell silent. "We are here today for an emergency. Motion regarding new evidence in the case of Oliver Miller," she said. "Mr. Harris, proceed." Oliver's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we have obtained a recording from the night in question, evidence that proves my client was at home at the time of the alleged crime. The recording includes both his voice and a time-stamped television broadcast." The prosecutor, a stern-looking man in a grey suit, leaned forward. "Your Honor, this is highly unusual. A recording from a child's toy? That's hardly reliable evidence." Emma frowned. "He didn't even want to hear it." Mr. Harris remained calm. "With all due respect, the recording is clear, unaltered, and includes an independent timestamp from a news broadcast. We request that the court allow it to be played." The judge studied them for a long moment, then nodded. "Proceed." Martha pressed the play button. The courtroom filled with the sound of Oliver's voice. "All right, little star, what story shall we tell tonight?" Emma felt her father's eyes on her, but she didn't turn. She was watching the judge. Then, the TV news anchor's voice came through the speaker. "Good evening. It's exactly 9:02 p.m. and these are tonight's top stories." A hushed murmur spread through the room. Mr. Harris spoke firmly. "The prosecution claims the crime took place between 9:10 and 9:30 p.m. If my client was home at 9:02 telling a bedtime story, then he could not have been at the scene of the crime." The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. "Your Honor, we request time to analyze this evidence." The judge held up a hand. "The recording is clear, the timestamp is undeniable." She turned to Oliver. "Mr. Miller, you have been accused of a serious crime, but this new evidence significantly undermines the prosecution's case. The court will review the details further, but for now I am ordering your immediate release on bail." Emma's heart soared. She turned to Martha. "Did we win?" Martha's eyes shone. "Not completely, but your daddy is coming home today." Tears welled in Emma's eyes as the guards unlocked Oliver's handcuffs. He stood slowly, rubbing his wrists before turning toward his daughter. Emma didn't wait. She jumped from her seat, running straight into his arms. "Daddy?" Oliver caught, her lifting her up like he used to. "Oh, my little star," he whispered, his voice breaking. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the courtroom, not the whispers around them, only the fact that she had done it. She had saved him. But deep inside, Emma knew one thing: the fight wasn't over yet. The ride home felt unreal. Emma sat in the back seat, holding her father's hand tightly as Martha drove. She hadn't let go of him since they left the courthouse, afraid that if she did, he might disappear again. Oliver kept glancing at her, his tired eyes filled with love and something else, relief. "You saved me, sweetheart," he whispered, squeezing her hand. "You really did." Emma's heart swelled. When they pulled into their neighborhood, something unexpected happened. People were outside, neighbors, shopkeepers, even Mr. Dawson. They stood on the sidewalks, waiting. Some held small signs that read, "Welcome home, Oliver." Others simply clapped as the car passed. Emma's eyes widened. "Daddy, they believe us." Oliver exhaled sharply, as if he had been holding his breath for days. "Looks like they do." Martha pulled into the driveway, and before the car even stopped, Emma unbuckled her seatbelt and threw herself into Oliver's arms the moment he stepped out. He lifted her effortlessly, hugging her close. Cheers erupted from the small crowd. Some people wiped their eyes. Even the toughest-looking men in the neighborhood turned away, pretending not to be emotional. Then, from the back of the crowd, a figure stepped forward. It was the prosecutor, the man who had tried to keep Oliver. In jail. Silence fell over the street as he approached. Emma's small arms tightened around her father. The prosecutor sighed, adjusting his tie. "Mr. Miller, I owe you an apology." Oliver's expression was unreadable. "Do you?" The man nodded. "We were wrong. I was wrong. The case against you seemed strong, but we didn't look hard enough. If it weren't for your daughter—" He glanced at Emma, then shook his head, almost in disbelief. "She's remarkable." Oliver looked down at Emma, pride shining in his eyes. "Yeah, she is." The prosecutor cleared his throat. "The investigation is being reopened. The real culprit will be found." Then softer, he added, "I'm truly sorry for what you've been through." Oliver studied him for a long moment before finally nodding. "Thank you." The prosecutor turned and walked away, leaving the crowd murmuring. But Emma didn't care about him anymore. She only cared about the way her father held her, safe and warm, just like before. That night, as Emma got ready for bed, Oliver tucked her in just like he always did. He brushed her hair back and smiled. "My little star," he whispered, just like before. "What story shall we tell tonight?" Emma grinned sleepily. "One about a brave girl who saved her daddy." Oliver chuckled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "That's my favorite one." And as Emma drifted off to sleep, wrapped in the warmth of her father's love, the world finally felt right again. They were home. They were together. And that was all that mattered. This story proves that love, courage, and truth can overcome even the darkest moments. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us of what truly matters. What would you have done in Emma's place? Let us know in the comments.